everybody, and welcome to another episode of Frugal Noodle, a show dedicated to helping you understand finance, early retirement, and money in general. I am your host, Cody, and on today's episode, we're going to be finally covering cryptocurrency. We're going to be getting into the basics, understanding some of the foundational terminology and some of the history of crypto in this episode. This is a 3-part series, so make sure to come back for parts 2 and 3. And as a disclaimer, I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This is just me sharing as I learn. Now, in this digital age we find ourselves in, there's a lot that intimidates the layperson about technology in general. And I know from my own personal experience that when I first heard of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and all these other currencies, I had no idea what it was about. I didn't know if I should ever even really care. I didn't even take any time initially to understand any of it because it just felt like something I was not ready to wade in the waters of, or, I almost felt like you needed a degree to understand it, maybe some sort of computer science degree. And while I'm sure that might help, I don't think that you need a degree to understand crypto. In fact, I know you don't, because here I am, degreeless, understanding crypto well enough to be taking advantage of it. So on today's episode, we're going to get into the basics, some simple terminology, as well as some history of crypto before we get into more of the nitty-gritty of where we find ourselves today in the world of crypto. So first, we're going to define some terms, and it probably will make up the bulk of this episode. But if you don't know anything about crypto, I think you should have some idea of what people are referring to when they use some of the terminology that is only used in crypto. And if you already know a lot about crypto, then hey, maybe you can listen to this and let me know if I'm explaining things properly or not. So let's first define cryptocurrency. A cryptocurrency is a digital alternative to fiat money, which is maintained by a decentralized system built on cryptography and not regulated by any governing body. There's a individual big on the scene whose name is Jan Lansky, and he has 6 conditions that make a cryptocurrency a cryptocurrency. Number 1, the system does not require a central authority. Its state is maintained through distributed consensus. Number 2, the system keeps an overview of cryptocurrency units and their ownership. Number 3, the system defines whether new cryptocurrency units can be created. If new cryptocurrency units can be created, the system defines the circumstances of their origin and how to define the ownership of these new units. Number 4, ownership of cryptocurrency units can be proved exclusively cryptographically. Number 5, the system allows transactions to be performed in which ownership of the cryptographic units is changed. A transaction statement can only be issued by an entity proving the current ownership of these units. And number 6, if 2 different instructions for changing the ownership of the same cryptographic units are simultaneously entered, the system performs at most one of them. So those are the 6 conditions, in the opinion of Jan Lansky, that make a cryptocurrency. And it's very confusing when you are hearing all that and reading all that, mainly because we're talking about a system and what defines the system as being a cryptocurrency. If you understand the terminology further on that I'm about to explain, then I think it's easier to backtrack to those 6 conditions and refer to them with different terminology that makes sense. Now, I mentioned that a cryptocurrency is a digital alternative to fiat money. Fiat money is a government-regulated form of currency with no real intrinsic value and no value in its use. The easiest example is the US dollar, which is backed by nothing other than our perception of its value. Most importantly, fiat is controlled by a government, a governing body, in the US dollar's case, the Federal Reserve. Cryptocurrency is built on a system of cryptography. And to put it simply, cryptography is the practice of assembling or disassembling codes in order to make something more secure or break down its security and understand how to make it more secure in the end. Another term that's already come up is decentralization. A decentralized system is a system that has no governing body that controls it. There's no fiat money that is decentralized. And a lot of cryptocurrencies will call themselves decentralized when in fact they are not, and I'll explain that later on. Now, a term that you may have heard of before, but probably don't know what it means yet, is blockchain. And what blockchain is a record of transactions on a given network for a cryptocurrency. In the case of Bitcoin, the network is peer-to-peer, which means there's no third party to rely on. Thus, building trust in the network is easier because there's not an all-seeing eye that maintains everything. Everyone is shaking hands in the system to confirm the blockchain. Now, what each block is on a chain is a series of transactions that are requested on the network, which that transaction is submitted for validation by the peers that make up the network. And the peers that make up the network verify the transaction. They will deem it real and legitimate, and then it'll be added to the blockchain as a block, which is where all of that peer-to-peer handshaking takes place to validate every single block on the blockchain as being true and accurate. It's unalterable once it's submitted to the blockchain. And that's why a lot of people that understand cryptocurrency have a lot of more trust in cryptocurrency than they do any other fiat money. There are two ways that new coins within a cryptocurrency are found or mined, which I'm sure you've heard the term mining within cryptocurrency. The first way is through proof of work, which is how coins like Bitcoin or Ethereum are mined. Now, mining in a proof of work situation is essentially what I described in the blockchain definition, where miners use what is called a rig, which are computers and large servers sometimes, to validate transactions that are then added to the blockchain. And in doing so, they are then paid in return of that currency that they are validating. Now, a node is another term that I've heard a lot of and never understood before, but basically a node exists on the blockchain network and shares the understanding of completed transactions with other nodes in a peer-to-peer setting. And because it's peer-to-peer, there's not a central server house that holds all this information and you can access remotely. How it works is if I'm a node here where I'm at, and there's another node in Russia, if for some reason I lost all of my assets on my computer, I lost the access to this network where these transactions have been validated on the blockchain network, it wouldn't matter because the peer over in Russia is maintaining it. So if another peer jumps on, they can confirm everything that Russian peer is already holding on to, that node in Russia. And because there's so many thousands, hundreds of thousands of nodes maintaining these networks, it's not realistic for them to ever all be off the network or lose all of their information of the blockchain network, that it would disappear completely. Now, proof of work mining has brought up a lot of environmental concerns, and there's been a lot of light shed on these issues and the issues that they pose for the environment. And to an extent, they are very valid concerns. Back in its earliest days, 10 minutes of mining to complete a block on Bitcoin would net you 50 coins. And it didn't take as much energy to do this previously. It was all based on the technology of the time. Simple laptops with lackluster hardware inside were able to mine no problem. But as more dedicated server houses and computer factories basically started churning out these blocks with greater graphics cards and RAM and everything, once those all jumped on the network and were competing with the other computers on the network, the energy consumption to mine Bitcoin has just skyrocketed. And it's argued that the mining of Bitcoin globally consumes as much energy as a country like Argentina or Ukraine. However, the amount of energy used doesn't matter as much as where that energy comes from. And it's argued that most of the energy is actually hydropower, because a lot of the dedicated mining takes place in countries like China, which claim to use mostly hydropower. The validity to that claim, I don't know, but I certainly hope it's true, because Bitcoin is the most widely used and accepted currency at this time, as far as cryptocurrencies go. And it would obviously be pretty disheartening to hear that an imaginary currency is doing so much harm for the environment. Another thing that maybe you've seen in the news over the years, as more and more miners jump on mining Bitcoin and Ethereum and other proof of work tokens, a lot of these people buy up all of the nicest graphics cards that they can find. And then therefore the prices of those graphics cards for people that are building gaming PCs, the price just goes up. And in most cases, you can't even find the nicer graphic cards. Another thing that makes Bitcoin interesting is the halving that takes place. And what that is basically the first blocks of Bitcoin would net you 50 Bitcoins once you solve them. But we're at a time now where one block is only worth 6.25 Bitcoins, because after each halving cycle, the blocks cut in half by how much Bitcoin you can earn from solving a block. And to get a little more in detail on how the mining of Bitcoin works, there are pools of miners that compete against other pools. And when a pool solves a block, they get the rewards of it and split it among the miners that make up their pool based on the dedicated work that each one puts in. So a pool large enough, nobody is getting a full Bitcoin at this point. They're getting a portion of a Bitcoin, or what is called Satoshis or sats, which is any decimal beyond one full Bitcoin is considered sats. And Bitcoin was designed in a way that it adjusts in difficulty every, I believe it's 2 weeks, how easy or difficult it is to resolve a block, so that on average, one block will be completed every 10 minutes. Sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's a little more, but the average is 10 minutes. And only one pool or one miner can complete a block. There's no splitting among the various pools, if that makes sense. Now, alternative to proof of work currencies is the proof of stake currencies. And what these do that differ from proof of work is that all you have to do is hold the token, the cryptocurrency, and that is your proof of stake in that currency. And therefore, you are rewarded for holding it more of that currency. Now, sometimes you have to actively select pools to stake your holdings into in a proof of stake situation for you to net the returns. But in most cases nowadays, the newer currencies are designed so that all you have to do is hold the currency in your wallet, and the proof of stake is enough there that you will earn returns just by holding. And it's typically based on the percentage of a given transaction. So in the case of SafeMoon, 5% of each transaction is distributed to all holders based on their own holdings. Proof of stake still uses some electricity, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to proof of work currencies. And therefore, the environmental concerns for proof of stake are pretty much eliminated. And the best examples of proof of stake that at least I'm involved in are ADA, which is Cardano, SafeMoon, which I'm sure you've heard of by now if you're listening to this episode, and Dogecoin, which is an alternative to Dogecoin. Dogecoin is different from Dogecoin in that it's proof of stake. So when you hold Dogecoin, you do not earn any more Dogecoin just for holding it. When you hold Dogecoin, you do earn extra Dogecoin just for holding it when transactions take place on the network. And also it is DeFi. And what DeFi means basically is that it deflates every transaction. There's a small portion of the transaction that is burned, which is the same way that SafeMoon works. Most coins nowadays are designed as a proof of stake coin. Now, I mentioned holding currency in your wallet. And wallets come in many forms in the cryptocurrency world, but essentially they're what their name suggests. They're just a way of holding and managing your crypto. Some forms are more safe than others. A lot of exchanges like Coinbase and Binance, they have a exchange wallet, which is arguably one of the least safer ways to hold your currency, although it's argued the opposite, that it is still completely safe and fine, but to each his own. They also, like Coinbase and Binance, have their own separate app that serves as a wallet, which is more secure because it actually has some built-in security beyond your login information. There are cold or hot storage wallets. Hot wallets are connected to the internet at all times and have a higher risk of being breached by hackers. This is like a software that you can put on your computer, apps on your phone, or browser-based applications. And then there are cold wallets, which can be disconnected from the internet and are therefore less likely to be infiltrated. These are typically a hard wallet, and that would be like a physical wallet you can order and have it shipped to you. The two most common brands I know of are Trezor and Ledger. I personally don't have a hard wallet myself, but those are always an option. And there's also paper wallets, which is basically a wallet you activate through an app or a service that offers it, and it disconnects from the internet once you write down the information that will help you reactivate it when you're ready to use that currency or sell that currency. And most, if not all, wallets are protected with multiple layers of security. And the most important layer of security is the seed phrase. So if I have an app like Trust Wallet and it uses my biometric information to log in, it also uses PIN codes to log in, but it has a seed phrase so that if I were to want to ever log into my Trust Wallet on another device, before I can even access that wallet, I need to know the seed phrase, which is automatically generated by the wallet service. Typically, a seed phrase is 12 to 24 unique words. They aren't coherent to each other. They don't make sense, and that's the purpose of them. They have to be input into the wallet app in the precise order, precise spelling, and that's the only way to reactivate a wallet, which is why if you've ever seen reports in the news or whatever of somebody saying that they bought, thousands of Bitcoin back in 2011, didn't think anything of it, wrote down the seed phrase on a piece of paper somewhere and they can't find it, and now all that Bitcoin is lost, it's because the only way to reactivate the wallet that all that Bitcoin is in is to properly put in that seed phrase. And that's the added layer of security that makes wallets phenomenally harder to be breached. It can be breached remotely if your phone is connected through some phishing software or your browser is connected through some phishing software, and then hackers will basically see the app and be able to send it to their own wallet. So that's how they get past the seed phrase. It's by actually using your device remotely, so they don't need to enter the seed phrase. Now, just a couple more terms that are a little more relevant nowadays. One being fungible. And fungible defines an asset or currency that can be broken down into smaller forms of itself and is recognizable in all of those forms as that asset. And like I mentioned before, the decimal places that build up to a full Bitcoin are referred to as Satoshis or sats for short, just like how cents add up to dollars. Now, non-fungible defines assets that are distinguishable from one another, although they may be built on the same network. And this is all that digital art that you've been seeing selling around now called NFTs, Non-Fungible Tokens. These two terms weren't necessarily that relevant only a few years ago, but because of the recent explosion of NFTs, I felt it necessary to define those, that NFTs are a part of the cryptocurrency world. There are a lot of exchanges coming out right now and on the horizon that have their own cryptocurrency that you use within their exchange to buy NFTs, which are as individual pieces of digital art worth more at face value of what they are than the currency that you bought them with. And based on the rarity or the name behind the NFT, it can be worth more than an NFT that is built on the same network. It's all very confusing. I know I'm still learning a lot of it myself, but it's a very interesting world and it's a part of the world you live in now. So might as well at least learn about it. And as we get into these episodes a little deeper on crypto, I'm sure I will be defining more terms as they come up, but I felt like this was a pretty good list of things to define ahead of time and explain some of the processes. But if I can sum up crypto in my own analogy that probably has some inaccuracies in it. Let's say that you want to be one of the handful of other people known for being able to touch your nose with your tongue, which is a claim that is worth a sum of money if it can be proven. So you find a trustworthy group of individuals who can vouch for you, and you stick your tongue out and prove that, yes, you are able to touch your nose with your tongue to this group of people. They look at each other and shake hands and say, yeah, that person sure can touch their nose with their tongue. They give you a trophy with a tongue touching a nose on top of it or something. And then they go tell everyone that they know that you are fully capable of touching your nose with your tongue. And for being present for the act, they are also rewarded slightly. Then that one interaction of you performing such an act is logged to the history books forever, which cannot be altered. From then on, in your trophy is your physical proof of being able to do so that some people are willing to pay money for. If touching your nose with your tongue is one currency, then being able to lick your elbow or double jointed are other currencies. The people that vouch for you are the miners and validate your ability, which we'll call a transaction in this scenario, to do whatever feat you're trying to prove. Your trophy is the currency that you walk away with once the transaction is validated. It's kind of loose. There's probably some holes in there, and it doesn't explain everything, I guess, but I mean, I think, that works, right? Now, I want to get into the history of crypto a little before we end this episode. And in the next part of this series, we'll get into a little more of the specifics of currencies and stuff. And by the end of the series, I'm going to show you a little bit of how you can actually get involved in the cryptocurrency world, maybe buy your own assets in it, because it's here and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. But for this episode, a little history on crypto. A lot of people who know even just the slightest bit about crypto think of Bitcoin as the first cryptocurrency and the origin of crypto in general, but that is wrong. The first conception of cryptocurrency dates back to 1983, when an American cryptographer by the name of David Chaum proposed the first blockchain protocol that later in the 90s led to the development of what he called DigiCash, a decentralized digital currency built off of the cryptographic protocol that he had proposed. Now, DigiCash is no longer around, and David Chaum is kind of got a lot of mystery behind him in his own right, but this was the foundation of cryptography and cryptocurrency, and it was back in the 80s. And the idea of cryptocurrency, when it was first thought up, was to be able to control your money in a decentralized system that didn't rely on a government to oversee the transactions and monitor closely. There are many reasons why someone might want their transactions with a currency to be untraceable, and most of the reasons that come to mind are dark, but I think in general, the idea behind cryptocurrency is that having something built with rules around it used as a form of currency and making it so that those rules can't change makes it more trustworthy from the beginning. The way Bitcoin is designed, it will always increase in value. There will never be more Bitcoin made. The US dollar, they could print another $1 trillion tomorrow, and they don't even need to necessarily print it. They can just say there is now another $1 trillion and distribute it to the citizens of America and say, here's your stimulus, which is what they've done. And because they do that, the value of the US dollar goes down when used against commodities that we're trying to purchase. That won't happen with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Now, there are inflationary cryptos. Dogecoin is inflationary. About, I think it's 10,000 Dogecoin are printed every minute or 10 minutes or something. I don't know. But the point is that money, fiat money, has the value it has because of our perception. So cryptocurrencies can have the value that they have, or a greater value or a lesser value based on our perception. Back on the history, back in 1998, a description of another cryptocurrency was published in a paper by an engineer of the name of Wei Dai. And what he described was a cryptocurrency called B-Money, which was, again, an anonymous electronic cash system similar to DigiCash. And this concept was then turned real by a Nick Szabo, who created BitGold. And BitGold basically worked the same way that Bitcoin now works in a lot of ways anyways. It was a proof of work cryptocurrency, and the proof of work was assembled and disassembled cryptographically. Now in 2009 is when Bitcoin finally came to realization from the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody knows for sure who this person is. There's theories. There's a lot of wild theories out there on who it is, but the developer Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin in 2009 with a proof of work scheme, and essentially that's where between 2009 and where we are today, we find the explosion of cryptocurrency. Year after year, more and more cryptocurrencies made it to the market. There was Litecoin, Ethereum, and then exchanges came out with their own currencies like Binance and their coin, and some of the deeper exchanges, which PancakeSwap isn't necessarily that deep anymore, but they have their own currency called Cake. And nowadays, there's thousands of cryptos made every week, if not more. It's kind of hard to keep track of, and that's why there's a lot less trust in them nowadays. But we'll get into more of those fresh coins that are minted every day in one of the other parts of this series. But I think really the key takeaway for this episode is obviously some of the definitions that help define crypto and maybe give you a better footing in understanding this world. And also that there's always been a desire to have more of a user and people controlled form of currency that doesn't rely on a governing body, doesn't rely on any form of centralization, and is therefore something that people can put their trust into. And that's what led us to cryptocurrency and where we are today. I know this is a lot to take in. Maybe you already know a lot of this, and it's just scratching the surface of what you really know already. And hopefully, if you do know a lot and I made any mistakes, you'll help point them out, and I will address them in part 2. I've just seen a lot of people on some of my own videos and other videos basically saying, I don't understand this world. I want to understand it better. And there's so many sources out there, and I don't expect mine to be a beacon of light for anyone, but I think the more that this information can be dispersed, the more that people can get involved, and hopefully the better it is for everyone that is already involved and those that get involved. But thank you for listening to the first part of the crypto series here on Frugal Noodle. I hope you learned something, if not a lot of some things. On the next episode, I'm actually going to deviate from crypto, and every other episode is going to be a different topic. So next episode is going to be back to standard finance. Then we'll get into part 2, and then we'll do another standard finance episode, and then part 3 of crypto. And that's when we will wrap it up. I'm sure we will return to crypto many more times after part 3 is done, but I wanted to have this dedicated time to this subject. Be sure to follow Frugal Noodle on wherever you are on social media and wherever you get podcasts, so you can keep up to date on the latest episodes. There is a link in my show notes below. The music for this episode was produced by CARBS. Thank you for listening. This is Cody, and I will see you next time.